Hey guys, Graham here again with another tutorial for Dr. Carter's AFAS 377 course on the Harlem Renaissance. I'm recording these tutorials as sort of a guide for students doing their end of course projects, and specifically for those students using Spreaker, because that's the tool that I used for my podcast project. So for my podcast, I was taking a look at jazz during the Harlem Renaissance, and specifically how the style of music itself evolved during that era. And obviously, a huge part of that podcast is the music. You know, it's about music. I can't just talk. I need to play some music in the podcast. But the problem was, I didn't just have MP3 files of 1920s jazz recordings, just sitting on my hard drive. So I went to YouTube to find the music that I wanted to use in my podcast. But the problem with YouTube is that it's not easily put into Spreaker. We need MP3 files to use as Spreaker tracks. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to pull up a YouTube video, decide sort of what audio segment from the video you want to use in your podcast, how to download and extract the audio from that video, and then how to put it into Spreaker. So let's get started. First and foremost, obviously you need to find your source material. So in my podcast, one of the songs I used was Duke Ellington's Black and Tan Fantasy. So thankfully, this channel uploaded an audio recording of that piece. So you're going to pull up your YouTube video, and the next thing you want to do is give it a listen and determine where in the audio you want to start using it for your podcast and where you want to stop using it for your podcast. So let's go ahead and give this a listen. Okay, so I gave the first 27 or so seconds a listen, and it sounds like that's kind of the intro to the song. My podcast was descriptions of the style and of the history, and I obviously need to include music, but you don't want to include, 3 minutes and 13 seconds of an entire song when the course project was limited to a certain number of minutes. So you want to cut it down. So we figure out, okay, I want roughly the first 27 seconds. So go ahead and write that down for your video on a sheet of paper, a sticky note, whatever. Just make a note of that. And then go ahead and go to the URL and copy it. And then we're going to go over to this, which is a YouTube to MP3 converter. And I know some of these sites can seem a little sketchy, a little circumspect, but this one in particular I've used pretty extensively, and I've had no issues with any of the files that I've downloaded from them. So I trust it, and I would recommend this one. And the URL for that is www.youtube-mp3.org. So we've got our URL copied. We'll go ahead and paste it and click Convert Video. So now it's converted it to MP3, and go ahead and click the download link. And we see it pop up into our downloads. It pulls up iTunes because we downloaded an MP3, but we're not going to use that. So this might look a little different if you're on Windows or if you use a different browser like Firefox or Chrome. But generally, the next step is to pull up your downloads folder, sort of whatever that looks like for you. And we can see right there at the top is our recently downloaded MP3 file. And the name of that file is going to be the name of the YouTube video title. So right click that, open with QuickTime Player. Cool. So now we are going to want to trim our audio because we don't want the entire thing. So the way to trim that in QuickTime Player is to go to Edit, Trim, or just do Command T. And that'll open this trim menu. So the way this works is you've got a left yellow bar and a right yellow bar. and those represent the start and stop point of the audio that you're going to keep. So if I move this over here, I'm keeping the first half of the song. So this is why we made a note earlier of how much of the audio we actually wanted to use. So I know I want roughly 27, 28 seconds of audio. So I'll go ahead and move my stop bar to, we'll do 28. And it's important to note, in this step, it doesn't need to be exact. You just want a rough estimate of how much audio you want. And it's better when you do your first trim to have too much audio. Don't try to be exact, because it's pretty hard to align these, when the entire song is in this bar. Each sort of millisecond of song is pretty small. So it's better to have too much, because in the next step I'm going to show you how to sort of exactly trim. So once you get a rough estimate of how much you want, I'll do about 28.5 seconds. Go ahead and click trim. And now it's in untitled edited file, so we're going to save, Command S. Okay, I'll save that to my desktop. And okay, so this next step's a little weird, but it's kind of a trick that I picked up. You're going to want to actually quit QuickTime Player now. So we quit that, and now just go back to where you just saved, and just go ahead and open it back up. So the reason that we do that is because now when I open the trim menu, the entire menu is just my 28 seconds. If we hadn't closed QuickTime Player, it sort of still saves your edited data, and when you go to the trim menu, it will pull up the entire song again, and we still won't be able to edit with the sort of exact fine detail that we want. So that's why we close and reopen QuickTime Player, and now we can kind of get exactly the audio that we want. So let's go ahead and give a listen to what we have at the end right now. You can place a cursor within your yellow bars by clicking between them, and then listen to what you've got there by pressing play. So I'd like to end my audio with that sort of hi-hat hit and cut out that sax entrance. So you can see using the sort of visual representation of the audio as a guide is really useful. So if you watch it as it plays, you can see this was that hi-hat hit that I wanted to keep, and then there's some silence, and then this was the saxophone section entrance. So I want to go ahead and cut them out. I'll show you sort of what it looks like if you do it wrong. So look, say if I don't cover that little peak exactly. You kind of hear it start to, entering the sound. So I'm going to make sure I cut all of them out, and now let's give it a listen. Perfect. So now we've got what we want. Go ahead and trim. Cool. And now what you're going to want to do is save this file again. So we'll give it the same name. Save. Replace. Okay. And now this is actually, there is a bug sometimes that happens. What we need to do now is export the audio from this file. Because we've been working with it in QuickTime Player, it actually saves it as a .mov file, whereas we need an MP3 file to work in Spreaker. So sometimes there is a bug in QuickTime Player that I encountered while I was doing my podcast. If you run into an error doing this step that I'm about to show you, just go ahead and quit QuickTime Player and open the file we just did, and then start this step again. And that every time that resolved the bug for me. It's just some weird stuff in their software. So let's give it a try. Maybe that'll pop up for me and I'll show you how to fix it. But if not, like I said, just quit out and then follow this step. Okay, so we're going to go to File, Export, Audio Only, and I'm going to call it Black and Tan Fantasy Audio. Oops. And I'll save that onto my desktop as well. Okay, yeah, so I am getting that bug that I mentioned. So sometimes this will happen, and what you need to do is just go ahead and quit that, close QuickTime Player completely, and then reopen your file, and now do that same step. So File, Export, Audio Only, Black and Tan Fantasy Audio. Save it to the desktop, and it works. So I'm not sure exactly what that bug is, but like I just did, if you quit QuickTime Player and just open the file again, it works itself out. So now we're going to go into Spreaker. Okay, so here's my Spreaker Studio. I've got some other tracks lined up that I can play while I'm recording my podcast. But let's say I want to get this one in there. Here's our audio file. There are two ways you can do that. The easy way, if you have, sort of desktop access to it, is just click, drag. Or if you don't want to do it that way, or you don't have it easily accessible on your desktop, you're going to go to the top of your track list, hit the plus button, go to wherever the file's located. For me, it's on my desktop. It might be in a folder like podcast for me. But this one's on the desktop. You choose the MP3 file and hit open. And there it is at the bottom. So that's how you get it into Spreaker. And then you can play it. And it's ready to use in our podcast. So in other videos, I'll show you sort of how to actually record your podcast and use these tracks, while you're recording your podcast or streaming it live. But that about wraps up this video. And that's how you go from a YouTube video to having specific audio from the video in your Spreaker podcast lineup. Thanks for watching.